The process of finding solutions of an equation, we build what we call an XY table. Now, before I get to that, notice that our variables are X and Y's. You're not always going to see variables that are X and Y's. They could be any letter that we might use. However, as our solution progresses, we're always going to choose the lower letter, the one that alphabetically is before the other one, as our first value of the coordinate pair. So although I have a y equals, its solutions are going to be in the form xy, a coordinate point xy. If I had another one that were, for example, maybe was b equals 2a minus 1, that's also an equation. It also has two variables, and its solutions are going to be in the form of a comma b. And we'll see some of those as we go, but typically we use y's and x's as our unknown variables. So how do we build an xy table? Well, to begin with, what we're going to do is kind of build a modified xy table. So I'm going to say x, then I'm going to have the equation y equals 2x minus 1, and then my y value. I want to choose some values of x. Typically with an equation and two variables, we want to choose at least 3 values. We're going to practice with 5 values. My values I love to find values near 0. So for example, I might choose -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. Now you may have chosen 5 completely different values for x, and that's fine. It doesn't matter what values you start with. It just matters that the values you start with, you work through all the way to the end. I've over time have started to use these values, especially -1, 0, and 1, because they're simple numbers. There's a negative, a 0, and a positive. And I usually want to find out what happens when I put a negative, a 0, or a 1 into this system. So for today, I have 5 values. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this value of x that I just chose, and I want to find out, does it have a corresponding y value that matches up with a -2? And how I find that out is I work through this equation. Y equals 2 times the x, which is a -2, minus 1. And what does y become if I work that out? 2 times a -2 is a -4. -4 minus 1 is a -5. So a -5 matches up with a -2. Now just repeat the process. Next value, y equals 2 times a -1 minus 1. If I solve that one, 2 minus 1 is a -2. -2 minus 1 is a -3. My favorite number is up next. Y equals 2 times a 0. I love 0. 2 times 0, 0. 0 minus 1, -1. All right, 3/5 of the way there. The next one is y equals 2 times a 1 minus a 1. Again, remember and take note, I'm always inputting this value into this original statement right here. So this is always 2x minus 1, but each time my x changes because I chose to use a different value of x. 2 times 1 is a 2. 2 minus 1 produces a positive 1. And my last value, y equals 2 times 2 minus 1, that equals a 3. So what I was able to do is I was able to create a y value that matches up with an x value. And then my 5 solutions that I was asked to do, I would write those as, I'll write them over here. I'm going to write them in the form of x, y as a coordinate point. So it'd be -2, -5, -1, -3, 0 and -1, 1 and 1, and 2 and 3. So those are my 5 solutions of an infinitely many solutions. These are just 5 solutions that make that particular equation true. It's important also too that our format. Notice I have parentheses on both sides of those. Those parentheses in the context of this problem communicate to me that I have a solution, an ordered pair solution. My solution to this equation is just not -2. or just a -5, is the coordinate pair parentheses -2 comma -5 parentheses. And it's good that we get used to writing that in that context. Because as we progress through our math journey, we're going to find other problems that have formats similar to this, but not exact. But sometimes we confuse the two if we don't pay careful attention to build good habits as we're working through. So how do you find a solution of an equation in two variables? Start with one of the variables. I chose an x on this one. Choose some values, whatever ones you want to choose. I try to choose easier values. You can choose harder ones. Solve the problem and find out what's the y value that matches up with those particular input values.